Would certain types of cardio benefit one postural archetype more than another? For example, if I'm working with a compressed A to P person, so they're restricted on the front, restricted on the back, and a wide infrasternal angle person with the same goals, would your cardio choices differ? The biggest rate limiting step when it comes to choosing specific cardio modalities is what equipment you have available. For example, where I work at Elevate, my options are a rower, like a wood weight treadmill variation, a slide board, and Airdyne bikes or the assault bikes. That's all I have. Those pieces of equipment can drive certain movements, but there's other movements that a person may possess that I might not be able to modify their energy systems work to help reinforce that. So, take this, I don't want to say take this with a grain of salt, but realize that if you don't have access to all the equipment in the world, this might be going a bit too in the weeds for someone, because any type of aerobic work or energy systems work has benefits unto himself, from pain relief to increased endurance to better learning. So you have other reasons why aerobic exercise or endurance exercise or any type of conditioning is useful beyond the movement side of things. So it's still important to do. That being said, there is also no difference or specialness with your conditioning choices from what movements you select than any others. For example, squats are going to improve certain movements, whereas hinges are going to improve different movements. The same is true with your conditioning tools that you have. And I'm not going to give you an exhaustive list, but I wrote down some stuff that I thought of when I might apply certain conditioning tools for some people versus others. For example, let's take the VersaClimber. That's a great one to improve dynamics of the infrasternal angle, whether you're narrow or wide. And it also is a good one to work on oblique shifting of the pelvis. So if you got some frontal plane limitations, prepare to join the VersaClimber nations. So that's a good move. Anything that works on single arm stuff, Jacob's ladder, elliptical, Airdyne bikes, all of that can be effective for improving rotation through the thorax and the pelvis for that matter, depending on what you choose, because you're incorporating longer reaches. So if you have someone who's A to P compressed, as Gerard mentioned, an elliptical or a Jacob's ladder could be money in the bank for that particular individual. I think rowing is very good as well, especially if you can get deep into the bottom of the row. That might be a nice move to reinforce squat mechanics or to eccentrically bias the backside of the body. And then with the pull, you're going to get anterior chest wall expansion. So that could be really good. Sled drags are another great tool. If you're doing a retro sled drag, that's very similar to a squat position. That can improve posterior expansion throughout the body. And then with a sled push, you're improving hip extension. Depending on your arm action, you might be improving pump handle. So your options are limitless in that regard. I mean, there was even, I wish I could find this, but I found at a gym when I was in Memphis that had like a lateral option on the elliptical. Oh, that was so cool, because you could drive pronation and hip abduction. I loved it. Slide boards are really good for that as well. So you have to look at what limitations your client possesses and then think what tool that I may have available will help me get the job for longer durations to improve work capacity, among other things. When I'm first working with someone, maybe they're not familiar with a lot of the stuff that we're talking about, I will, a lot of times, in terms of what physiological stuff I will bias, I will go more towards the aerobic side of things for two reasons. First reason is because doing aerobic exercise is going to build work capacity in the positions and activities that I need them to be able to do. One. Two, there's some pretty solid research out there showing that aerobic exercise can enhance your learning. And a lot of the first couple blocks when I'm working with someone are more learning intensive. Anything I can do to reinforce that, aerobic exercise being one possibility, is going to be money. So a lot of my peeps are going to be doing cardiac output in the beginning or even extensive tempo intervals. Once you have that base and they have some work capacity built up, then you just have to think about what demands am I trying to help my person meet. For example, if their goal is to be an avid hiker, like your boy, and maybe they're limited in hip flexion, you could choose something like high intensity continuous training step-ups to improve their movement capabilities and drive the conditioning tactics that they need to be able to do something like that. Whereas if you got someone who's a fat loss client and you need to do high intensity training to help create metabolic stress, but you know that they need to improve hip internal rotation mechanics, you might do an Airdyne bike to drive rotation through the thorax with a lower seat that's closer to 90 degrees of hip flexion, because that could potentially continue to improve internal rotation. And then you would just manipulate your work-rest ratios so you're driving the metabolic stimulus that you need. So you can really be creative with both the modalities you select and how you program them, depending on what your client's goals are. To summarize your amazing question, Gerard, you're going to be limited based on your equipment, but look at the equipment that you have available and watch how that person has to be able to move during the particular activity that you are going to have them do, because that can improve movement in some cases or not. And don't sweat if you don't have a lot of equipment, because you can there's still a lot of benefits to doing endurance work. Choose those moves that you need to be successful, and then choose the physiological parameters you need to have them be successful for the long haul. Aerobic exercise is great in the beginning to help build learning and work capacity, and then you can branch off to whatever type of conditioning tactics you need so your peeps can reach their goals like never before.